On behalf of our friends in the Land and Housing Circle, welcome to our January forum with the Reverend Brett Pinder, who is the Missional Strategist for Housing here in the greater Northwest area. He is a friend and colleague of mine. He's a transplant as well, not from Texas, but from the Northeast. He's served churches here in Oregon, in Toledo, and in the Portland area. He also hangs out with the Lutherans sometimes, and we tolerate that and allow his ecumenism. And then he also hangs out at Fremont UMC over in Northeast. And so, with that, welcome, Brett.
Hey, Brett.
Good afternoon. We're just on the other side. So I get to join you wearing two hats. I recently began serving the greater Northwest Episcopal area as a missional strategist for Ministries That Matter. That position continues to sort of get calibrated to figure out just what the scope and focus is. But it's especially focused on congregations who are either discerning or in the midst of working around housing ministries. But I also join you wearing a hat with the Land and Housing Coalition. I volunteer with the Land and Housing Coalition. And so I work with your core team as sort of a companion to walk alongside and just sort of be along for the journey with you all. For the 2 years before our last appointment changeover, so before this January 1, I worked in parallel with the Land and Housing Coalition and ran a cohort for churches in Southeast Portland to learn how to practice community organizing. So I've prepared a couple of things for us. What I would like to do is to talk to us a little bit about the bishop's call toward ministries that matter, especially around housing, and some of the realities of our housing crisis. I want to share about that briefly, and then invite us to think about our own stories and experiences with housing, and about the experiences of those that we care about. And so we'll do some sharing about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about some current and historic United Methodist or Methodist movement relationships to ministries around housing or ministries with the poor, and think together about what our hopes might be as we imagine sort of the scope of churches in the greater Northwest who might be starting to think or continuing to think about ministries that matter and what might change if we are all moving together. So you've probably heard that our bishop has been preaching for the last several months on sermons from what he calls the mile. And the M in the mile is ministries that matter, which he says are ministries that reach far beyond the people we can gather in our buildings and impact the real lives in the area and the community we live in. He says that as he arrived as our bishop, he spent some time listening to people in the greater Northwest area. He was listening especially for what ministries would be especially impactful. And he says two things came up. Two things came up as things that if we could move the needle, if we could make some change in those areas, it would impact so many people in our communities. And those two things are healthcare and housing. So housing. According to the Pew Research Center, 49% of Americans name lack of affordable housing as a major issue in the area where they live. And the issue isn't only homelessness. Our bishop has said in his sermons on the mile that most of us are only two bad decisions away from losing our housing security. In an article titled Deconstructing the Housing Process, there are 13 problems laid out that are specific to housing and housing instability. And what I mean by saying specific to housing is those 13 problems are specific to housing without thinking very deeply about compounding issues when we consider race, the economy, mental health care. I won't list them all, but some of the 13 problems include gentrification, increasing median prices of housing, disparity between wages and costs of housing, low market inventory, exclusionary zoning. These things go toward creating a crisis not just of homelessness, but of living conditions like people who are rent or mortgage burdened, paying more than 30% of their income toward housing expenses. It contributes to what are called super commutes, where people drive incredibly long commutes because to live where they can afford means that they live a long way from where they work. There are racial disparities in accumulated generational wealth, which are impacted very directly on practices like redlining that have kept marginalized communities from being able to own property and pass that down to create generational wealth. You can imagine that we could be here all day just going over those issues and numbers. But the immensity of this problem suggests to me that we are all touched by someone who experiences issues around housing. So I want to invite us to do a little bit of sharing. I'm going to invite us to break into pairs to do some one-to-one conversations, and then we'll share back to the large room. And I'm curious about two things. Who in your life or experience has struggles with housing stability? And what does that make you want to change? So let's take about 8 minutes for you to share in pairs, and then we'll come back together and share together what came up in the large room.
No. Shaheen is
Not official.
not yeah.
It's still the same idea.
But anyway, that's it.
I don't know how much they pay for rent, but I know it's more than the market.
My genuine experience with people experiencing housing. Well, far, you probably don't. Far more regional than just the dependency on something that took all their funds. Well, I had many people downtown. I had a lot of people who were very I got to learn all the terms basically by finding out about the people that I do. And it's exactly what you said. Many people who work downtown but didn't have executive jobs couldn't live anywhere near or don't want to miss a good cup of coffee.
So they did sell their house.
So I had the opportunity to hear more, but most of whom I heard from, these people were sticky and usually and there was a pattern where they simply couldn't get enough organization or enough resources to be able to go and find something more permanent rather than just making
For $500 more.
Well, I think she
but then I also, elderly people have not willing to see and so they live in very inexpensive housing. Yes. I
Well, now you have these companies that are designed to make a lot of money building properties all over the United States, and it's becoming an investment. In fact, I saw it was an ad on Facebook or something, of course, and it was one of these investment groups that you could join for as little as $10 out there, and you'll see a return on your money because they buy rental properties and then they charge. So the market, supposedly free market, immediately because providing larger, but not investment. What do they call those?
the tradition is
Several times.
it was a matter of pride. Probably could have had more. I guess it's not all necessarily relative. I guess that really was
Housing and credits, they're tied to our economic.
yes.
Unlimited amount of money can be made.
We missed that particular term, but we came later.
Yeah, I was thinking about that lately. We live in an area with a lot of new development, right at the edge of the urban growth boundary, where they keep expanding little by little. And there are all these small, cute houses, but 600, not at minimum. And to make it affordable, how do you do that? So someone who's making $25 an hour,
But you know, that is,
so they have $20,000 saved up.
My daughter is a social teacher.
he's talking about redlining.
They don't make a lot. They have a small house, 800 square feet. And I'd like to.
They weren't allowed. They were shut out. And they were not allowed.
Plus, they have
Just got rid of it. And man is black, so Nigerian, as a matter of fact. And he noticed when he was taking the bus from Atlanta, he was all of the black kids that had gotten on when he came were off the bus. And whites had started getting on, and they could continue because they had business in the country.
How much, you know what it is?
That's when it came down.
Friends, about 2 more minutes. Friends, about 2 more minutes. If you have been sharing stories but haven't gotten to what would you like to see change, think together a little bit about what you would love to see change.
Yeah.
Did you bring the sandwiches?
Yeah,
I can't speak to that. I can only
it was
say.
easy. I just drove by and picked him up.
Well, sure, but I mean, that was very generous of you.
No reason. Anybody?
They have no very diplomatic.
Well, he's like, yeah, he had high expectations of himself and the people who were under him. That wasn't the case with this guy. He was the chief report of the United States. Nigeria. He went back to Nigeria and almost got killed because of the war and crime. As a matter of fact, he was. Good question. Good question. He'll dig you up. I'm sure he will.
If you want to finish your last thoughts, we'll take some time and share what's going on in your conversation.
Score so far, 7 left.
Taylor is.
Yeah. She's emotional. And Travis's brother.
All right, friends.
Has a shirt.
I'm curious. I think that's right. So I'm curious what came up. Who are the people that came up for you?
My sister and her husband, each got laid off in their late 50s and were trying to find a job. And so they have sold their house and they're living in my mother's house. And they had nice, middle class, actually church-related jobs.
I'm going to pass the microphone around. One for people to hear, but also because we're recording and.
Oh, good. Thank you, Brad.
Sure.
We have a dear friend and neighbor who has a daughter with mental illness, and trying to house her is very, very challenging because she's somebody who responds, negatively to noise and chaos, and often places that she can afford are noisy and chaotic, and it's a constant struggle.
Who else came up?
Well, my friend Steve, who was just here, where'd he go? Oh, okay. I talked about a single room residency that he delivers food to every week, and it's in really rundown condition, has bugs and probably vermin too. And yet we both said, but we wouldn't want it to go out of existence because those people are housed and they're warm and they have a roof over their head. In some ways we have to live with some things that aren't ideal, but because it's housing, and that feels uncomfortable.
Thank you. And, yeah.
Well,
Thanks.
I'm dealing with this on the East Coast with my brother, who is caregiver to a mentally ill woman, and he can't do it anymore. They're living in housing, and they have to put their incomes together to live. But her mental health, screaming every night from dementia, things like that, is not allowing him enough sleep. And the lady that has dementia took his car and backed it into their apartment for $4,500 worth of damage. And how can you help as a family? My family doesn't want to step in anymore until her needs are met by somebody else and not by Larry, because his mental health isn't good either now. So mental health is really important.
Anyone else? Great, thank you.
In our group, we determined mostly the people that we know who have had struggles or challenges with trying to find adequate housing were mostly people very much like us, but who perhaps, rather than run into discrimination because of their race, simply were not able to handle life on their own, so that they really could not find ongoing adequate housing, and very often they would live in the little single room places in the central part of downtown, which is how I came to know them, and all different ages.
So my slant on some of this is a little different. I'm a landlord, I own a duplex. And when the COVID started and the eviction moratorium came, I had a tenant who stopped paying. And he continued to work through COVID the whole time. And you know, when the moratorium ended, we evicted him. And I think through all the COVID, he realized he was gonna get evicted, but he didn't care because he was getting paid, he got stimulus checks. So he was kind of gaming the system. So it's like, how do we keep people motivated to do the right thing, keep moving forward? I mean, I don't mind helping somebody out, but I want to see them working to a point where they're taking care of themselves. Another thing, in the Portland area, we talk about a housing crisis, but I think some of that is brought about by forgot the name of it, urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary keeps the price of houses high. And it's like, if we got rid of that, we just open up all this land for development, the value of my house would go down. I don't care for that, but it would be better in the long run, I think, if we got rid of the urban growth boundary. And also, I think there's rent control too, and I'm not sure that does a good job of helping people, because landlords have a tendency to more get the maximum you can to begin with, knowing you can't continue to raise rent. And then there's some exception for new housing development, I think for the first 3 years or something like that, you're pretty much unlimited. But after that, there's a limit on what you can do for rent increases. And so I think to a certain extent, if we got rid of the urban growth boundary, got rid of, the rent, the limitation on rent increases, I mean, this sounds terrible, but I think in the long run, this was actually help.
Thanks for bringing it up. What else would you want to see change then? That was a great segue into what are some things that you would like to see change?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Just resonating on what you were talking about, Aaron, around SROs. When I first started to work in downtown, Elaine Jones and I talk about often going into different SROs because I was concerned about mental health issues. She's a public health nurse. I miss that. I miss the dedicated spots where people who are coming out of a hospital or coming out of a drug treatment facility have a place for safe housing that isn't fancy. But at least it's on a tent. There's a toilet down the hall, there's a sink in your room. So I think we need to rethink how we shape the housing that's available so that we can have safe places for people to be. And that would probably eliminate most of the folks that are in tents now, places where they can have a pet, but they can still sleep in a safe, warm place. So I think that's a real good investment, and it needs government as well as nonprofit help to get there.
I think right behind you is.
So this is an idealistic idea, but I think not having housing and medical costs tied to profit in our economy in our capitalist society. I don't see a solution to that. I don't see any easy fixes, but for me, no.
Told me there were measures. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Let me say a little bit about Methodism and housing and ministries with the poor. I have three sort of categories of things that I want to share just a little bit about. And I'm going to ask us to imagine United Methodist churches and our connection with ecumenical partners across the greater Northwest area, and imagine what we might be able to do if we move together, what we might be able to change in the Pacific Northwest. So, first, I was reminded recently from Ethan that it has been speculated that Methodism helped to build the middle class in Europe. I actually don't think I learned that in seminary. Ethan is sure that I did. But I looked it up, and this is what I found. When John Wesley was born in 1703, 4 million out of Britain's 5 million people lived in abject poverty. The Methodists made such an impact on their nation through building a movement, through impacting people's personal lives, that in sometime far later than that original movement, in 1913, a French historian theorized that the Wesleyan revival created England's middle class, and that saved England from the kind of bloody revolution that their home country, France, saw. Now, I will say that's conjecture. They didn't have a whole lot of facts to build it on, but there was a later historian who would go a little bit further to find some underlying facts around that. I think it's still mostly a way of framing a story. But in those early days, Methodism was a movement, and it was bringing people together in numbers and in ways that transformed lives and transformed the world, or at least their corner of it. So fast forward to today. This is the second piece that I want to share. In our social principles, under the section on the social community, we hold that we support basic rights for all persons to equal access to housing, education, communication, but housing is named among this list that I'll go into shortly. We support the basic rights of all persons to equal access to housing, education, communication, employment, medical care, legal redress for grievances, and physical protection. Further, in paragraphs on the economic community, where we speak to the right of, rights to healthcare, rights of persons with disability, rights of immigrants, rights of the aging, rights of racial and ethnic persons. In each of those sections, access to equitable housing and community is listed as a value that we uphold. And the third thing that I'm going to be repeating from where I started is that today our Bishop Cedric Richforth is calling for us to praying with our feet, healing with our words, loving with our resources in ministries that matter. When it comes to housing, his call is for churches to consider ministries that bolster affordability, access, and security. And that might not look like building on every church that has land, but it does mean considering partnering with those who share our values to utilize underutilized spaces, like building space or parking lots that we just won't fill with the people that we gather. now I want to ask you to imagine something. This November, the Greater Northwest area held a symposium on housing. It was just a one-day event, and for that one-day event, we gathered over 220 people across the Pacific Northwest, across our Methodist connection. I don't have a number on how many churches that represents, but you can do some math and get close, I bet. Imagining that on average, 2 or 3 people from each congregation maybe attended. So I want to ask you to imagine the map of the Greater Northwest area. And imagine further the United Methodist congregations across the Greater Northwest. Imagine the ecumenical partners that we have connections with. What do you think we could change on affordable, accessible, stable housing if we all acted together, focusing on how to do something? What could we move the needle on? And I'm going to ask you to take another 8 minutes in one-to-one conversations, and we'll come back and we'll dream together a little bit.
That's tough.
The idea of everybody coming together. Seems to me we could raise awareness on some stuff.
Yes.
Make some things
And there's big grants.
well, put pressure. Everything you get is pressure.
And I think, numbers of
Good case.
get the stable.
So it's a state level.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just.
I know.
I gotta go.
Who has done something like that? Bingo. Well, yeah, that's cute, but that's cute. Yes. The values of the church. Yes.
Now, we're getting revenue, so we have
True, all those things are true. working to that. I never hear that they are getting input and interviewing people who are likely to end up with the house. What a person looking for housing wants. And that isn't a single person that's across the board. That's the hard part.
Yeah, it is, because if you look at the comments on that,
Yes.
people are like, good for them.
That's
You know, so I mean, it's not.
We're gonna push for it.
And then people are picturing tents and whatever, safe parking sort of situation. In an area that's really needed. People don't think of low-income people living in Tiverton and Walton and Sherwood, but there are a lot. And then W corridor there are so many apartment buildings. There are new apartment buildings going on like that, going in like that one at the end of Bull Mountain, but I mean, there's affordable housing.
But I think they should
Well, unless you want to provide all of the services that they would possibly need there.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the current thinking, and I don't agree with it.
Well, you think about it. I mean, we've seen RVs starting a little area there,
Well, I totally agree with you. I think that's the shortcoming of our planning is so far is we hear that
I think there needs to be a partnership too, because there's so many.
for a certain
Large or small as they are, becomes another entity.
I want somebody on that committee who's going to say,
on this issue, and not all working together. I think that's part of what Bill's talking about. You know, the response from top down in our state is not organized. And you can see it with the homeless coalitions. You know, from all the way from the government. There's too many lives.
There's too many lives.
We help with this.
And it's hard too because
But I think that's what I appreciate about the city was a part of it. We saw Rose Haven doing a small part that we could do. And we have facilities downstairs, you know, with the land tutors, just shower facilities and laundry. As far as transition areas.
All right, friends, let's dream a little bit together. What came up in your imaginations? What could we move in the Pacific Northwest if our greater Northwest Episcopal areas were acting together for some time on housing?
Well, it's hard to get lots of people together and have them be, all in one uniform way. We first talked about setting a goal, like, is it, in my area, 1 out of 10 people will have housing, 90% will, whatever it is, a goal that you can all work together. The value of the whole area is a value of bringing in options like government loans, foundation gifts, other kinds of things. So if we were all working together, we're much more likely to be able to affect some level of capital that would help things move in that way, and also change regulations. But we can't change Seattle's regulations, they can't change ours. So the value of the whole Episcopal area coming together would mean you could do the idiosyncratic things and have strength to do it. We might have more lawyers in our congregation, somebody else might have more contractors. You just figure out where the strengths are, but work on where you can work on, because you need capital to move ahead.
Yep, great. What else came up for folks?
Well, I think one of the things we talked about is just political activism. And when Brandy was here for Path Home, she said, the government doesn't listen to us. They don't listen to Join, they don't listen to the organizations that deal with homelessness. They listen to ordinary citizens. So if we can get everyone to show up at a council meeting or at the legislature or when something is going on, if we can have a real presence there as ordinary tax-paying folks that want something done, I think that might make a difference. We just have to get organized.
We have to get organized, Brad.
Preaching to the choir.
I have a follow-up to that. And Amy, you can help me out on this one.
Yeah.
Amy forwarded an email to me about the county, Multnomah County's budget is being prepared, and the chair of the county commissioners is holding a hearing, and I think it's like the third.
Saturday, right?
Yeah, Saturday. And we could forward you that email that has the date and the time and everything. Or if you just want to send a postcard or an email to her and let her know housing is number one. They've got money, we just need to get them to loosen it up and use it in a good way.
Right. Yeah.
Can I tell one more thing?
Sure. Sure.
My dream is that we could get together and form a group like we did the Goose Hollow Family Shelter and start something that would mirror a program in Eugene called Square One, and you can look it up, Google it, Square One, I think just Square One. And they have started with hoop houses, just PVC pipe with plastic over it, and they housed the homeless. Then they said this isn't enough. They had contractors build small houses that they did for free. They moved the people into small houses. Now they have more people in the hoop houses, some people in the small houses. And they did that with a number of villages around Eugene. And the latest one, I just love this. Now the people are actually buying into the houses with a $5,000 down payment. And if they can't afford that, they have a way to finance the $5,000. But slowly but surely, they'll build up a little bit of equity. And so they'll actually be able to say, I own this house. So I would love to see that happen in Portland.
Well, and that goes to the incremental bit by bit. If we're doing that here in Multnomah County, in Portland, and folks are doing that in Seattle, and we're doing that across the greater Northwest, that adds up to moving the needle. What else came up for you guys?
Oh, you have somebody else? Go ahead, Dan. I'll take it after.
I think a lot of it is also just remaining curious and open to many different kinds of things. Being aware, like Aaron was just talking about, different models and what's worked. And where can we make the biggest systemic kind of difference.
I've been aware that there is less of an understanding that would be if we go with an ecumenical wide and including many more people in the conversation that we are already having, we could be part of that conversation, but also I think that it would benefit the organizing and benefit the people who are wanting to know more if there was a plan and a pattern on what such a committee might undertake step by step, whether it was the same for each district or each group, but what the form would be. And so I think ecumenical would offer something that we can't get just in our local churches.
Just one last comment, I
Please.
can't get anybody else, but we also talked about not about me, without me. So where are the other representatives? And it's a lot to ask anybody who's houseless or on the verge of to participate in any kind of organizing activities. Most would say, come on, I just need a place.
Right.
But if there's development of some leadership, it needs to be done with people who need it and can bring their interests right to the fore. So you don't plan a whole house if that's not gonna be for them, you know, whatever.
Right.
Good.
Thank you so
And
much.
more than one, not just one person.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, friends, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for filling this space with stories of those whose lives are touching your own, and for moving into dreaming together about how the needle might move if we continue focusing on this as a greater Northwest area.
Give a benediction.
A benediction.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you, as a missional strategist, are you really still in a fact-finding mode, or is there a plan? Is there something that the Pacific Northwest Methodists are saying, hey, this is the direction we need to move in?
Sure. So the position right now has been created in order basically to do some accompanying and coaching with congregations who are either in the midst of housing ministries or who are discerning moving into housing ministries. The commitment at the start was a half-time position through the end of our current appointment year, so until the end of June. There is hope that we will continue the position further beyond that, potentially full-time. And so at this point, doing a lot of sort of fact-finding, a lot of conversations with congregations who are in those categories of either discerning or moving into or continuing some ministries, and kind of seeing what the landscape is of churches right now, and what the ways to further kind of calibrate the position. Calibrate is the word that somebody gave me that I'm sticking with. Yeah.
So basically, the United Methodist Church is full of bureaucracies, just like the government. So, I think if we want to do something, we have to do something, and then hope they come along at this point. But, because I think, the bishop's not going to step out and say, I am the housing guy and I'm organizing everything for everybody.
Sure.
I don't hear that.
Yeah.
But Brett, can you give us a list of the other churches that are in the discerning mode that we could work with?
Yes.
Okay. Not off the top of your head, but on paper sometime.
Yes, I can do that. I've been thinking about some congregations that might be helpful to talk to, and who would be helped by talking with you all. Yeah.
That'd be great partnerships, because there are properties in some areas that would be better to develop housing on.
Yeah.
And that would be, a nice partnership we
Yeah.
could expand on.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I'm hopeful that later in the spring we'll be able to launch a series of roundtable conversations for the greater Northwest area, designed for congregations who are in similar places, either in their work on ministries or in discernment, to be able to come together and cross-pollinate some ideas. I've had a conversation with the chair of our trustees, who has some thoughts about something similar, and we're gonna maybe try to coordinate, but be on the lookout for a series or two, kind of bringing some folks together, some conversations. Yeah.
I got here late, if you already did this, I apologize. Could you just give this group an update? I was at the Bishops' Conference in November, and it was amazing the churches, they're actually doing building right now. Could you just give us a quick recap of churches that are actually, have gone past discernment and are actually taking action and in construction or plan to start soon?
Just a couple.
Thanks. Otherwise, the answer is going to be no. A couple of projects. I would have to think and get you a list, which I can do.
Yeah, if we could have a list, that'd be great. I mean, we know about Christ Church in Beaverton, we went visit them, but
Right.
other than that, who else?
Yeah.
List would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you all. Thanks very much.
It's a benediction.
Oh, and a benediction? Go in peace.